So this one starts with a chef. Sorry. Am I getting too Ira Glassy with these intros? Let me know if I am. A while ago, this guy Lewis described the podcast as This American Life on Hallucinogens, and sometimes I think I really lean into that. Anyway, Evan Mallett is the chef and owner of Black Trumpet, the most famous restaurant in New England and a beacon on the hill for the local food movement. I know that New England famous is a negotiable term. Like, I don't specifically know of any chefs from New Hampshire who've ever competed on Chopped, which, as you know, is my only metric for thinking about food at all. But I'm learning, and I learned a lot from Evan's book, which is also called Black Trumpet, and is basically 2 parts cookbook, 1 part manifesto. It's a great and beautiful book. You know, he can write and he can cook. And late last summer, Christy and I went to the Portsmouth Public Library to hear him talk about it. He sampled a really great garden gazpacho that I forget the name of. We learned about heirloom vegetables and some various local food movements and a lot of other interesting stuff, most of which I don't remember because at one point, Evan used a phrase that stuck in my ear. He was talking about changes we can make to our local food economy, which could contribute to an improved system. An improved system. I like the sound of that. And, I don't know, maybe it's the imminent arrival of our child or the probably continuing disaster in Washington, D.C., or maybe it's just what happens to your brain once you're relatively secure in your job and living situation and romantic life and have basically nothing else to do, but for a while now, I've been feeling compelled to try and improve the world in some small way. So, an improved system. We could use one or a few of those, right? What are some places to start?
Well, I started working in New Hampshire around 2006, and I worked with a local commercial director and worked with him for about 5 months and then moved over to New York, where I lived for 3 years. I worked on a bunch of freelance projects and some co-producers there, and then I went off to LA. Worked at a documentary film production company there, and just kind of made my way back east.
This is Allison Keir. She made a short documentary called The Oyster Revival. No, it's not about a folky jam band. It's about the legislatively tricky but worthwhile process of oyster reef restoration and about the particular oceanic talents of oysters themselves. Oysters! They're not just an aphrodisiac anymore. In fact, that would barely make the first page of their resume. Not that you should do multiple page resumes, that's a weird choice. Don't do that. 1 page, tops.
So I had a background in writing, and I never really knew what to do with it. And I knew I was really interested and passionate about telling stories and, and really for a better cause. I wasn't sure what to attach that to. I wasn't really interested in writing for newspapers or, beauty products and magazines. And I didn't really want somebody over my shoulder telling me how to write either. And that was when I kind of started looking at film as a forum to work in.
Allison's approach to filmmaking is deliberately positive, which struck a chord with me. I'm increasingly becoming a you can catch more bees with honey kind of person, which, by the way, is a weird phrase because, who would want to catch bees? In any case, Allison's notion is you can get more oysters with honey. I feel like that's actually a better saying.
I kind of want some of us to stay away from the doom and gloom ones. I think for a while there it was you think you're making an impact by just putting all this negative information out there and, here's the problem, now go deal with it. But there's no information about how to deal with it, and there's no tools that you're giving your audience to try to figure out how they can help. And it's it's really overwhelming to hear that we're a few degrees away from our planet melting and our towns flooding, and what is one person going to do about that? Where's the resolution? So I want to seek myself and try to get other people to make those films with other that offer solutions, and maybe an audience would be attracted to that.
This seems like a good time to start talking about oysters for a second. So, this film, The Oyster Revival, what I liked about it was it taught me about something I didn't know anything about, a problem that felt like it could be fixed, you know? Like I left the theater thinking, oh, that's something that can be done. Like that's a box we can check. So, if you could briefly sort of describe what is the problem presented by The Oyster Revival.
The problem presented is the lack of community support and also local regulators not supporting some of these oyster restoration groups to rewild oyster reefs along the coastline. And, you know, when I started hearing the explanation as to why, it really felt ridiculous to me.
Okay, to put it simply, oysters are exceptionally good at cleaning dirty water. So, various community environmental groups want to put oyster reefs in dirty water areas to help clean it up. However, because oysters are food, there are regulations on the books that prevent people from raising food knowingly in dirty water. So what we're looking for legislatively, basically, is special dispensation for certain oysters, you know, who are going to do a different job than other oysters whose job is to get eaten at bars.
Well, oysters are thousands of years old. We don't even know how old they are, and they've been able to sustain themselves for this long despite all of the damage we've done to the ocean. So I think they're underestimating how powerful they are, and so some of these groups have been able to work around that and go to other areas and kind of, you know, prove that very point wrong. So it kind of comes down to, you know, some of these regulators, you know, reconnecting with the power of what our environment can do if we choose to work with it, to find balance with it. You know, I'm sure it's a lot of paperwork and money, but it's a lot of money to not do anything about it, and it eventually affects all of our health, which to me, you can't really put a dollar sign on. So, you know, we try to focus on some of the groups that were positively making a difference, like in Wellfleet. They, within a few years, grew an oyster reef to over 5 million oysters. When they were doing water monitoring tests, they were able to show that those oysters reduced the nitrogen levels by 70% in that area of water, which is a huge component to ocean acidification, which we're all hearing about damaging, you know, our marine life from the bottom of the food chain. It's suffocating our oceans, really. So, you know, it's not that oysters are going to fix everything, but it's one way that we can assist in the problem, you know, and look at, if oysters are doing this, what else is out there?
In all honesty, one of the chief emotions I experienced while watching Allison's documentary was fear. Fear and awe of oysters. Because, I mean, basically, what these environmentalists are doing is like taking a crate of oysters and like dropping it into a spot in the ocean and then just walking away. And coming back months later, and these oysters are putting up huge numbers. What else can these freaky little slimy things do, and how can I get on their good side before it's too late?
A really easy and even fun way to take part in this is going to some of these groups are having oyster events, you know, where they have beer and wine and music, and they serve oysters, and they make the shell recycling like a part of, you know, a way of showing what they're doing. And they take these shells, they put them through a facility for about a year to make sure they're healthy, to reintroduce back into the water. They put spat, which is basically little oyster eggs, onto the shell, put them back in the water, and that spat kind of swims around and attaches to other shells. And then that's how they start rebuilding themselves. A lot of times when you look at shellfish, you'll see them attached to other things. And these reefs, these oyster reefs, I mean, it's like natural concrete, the way that some of these reefs grow. And they also have been proven to help reduce shoreline erosion, because they work as a buffer, as, you know, some of these wave currents that are coming in and just, you know, tearing down our shorelines, you know, they're helpful in that way.
I took a coastal morphology class in college. mostly because you got to take a trip to Cape Cod at the end of the semester, and also because I heard it was an easy class and a quick way to fulfill a science requirement. Second thing turned out to not be true. Coastal morphology is super difficult, but I retained at least 2 things. First of all, I will always remember where to be if you're caught in a hurricane while on a barrier island, the inner uppermost coast. Because, see, hurricanes move counterclockwise, and therefore you'll get the smallest storm surge if you're standing there. And okay, so I guess opposite rules actually apply for the southern hemisphere, and maybe the west coast? Okay, well, let's say I retained at least one thing. Coastal erosion is insane. The real reason only rich people can afford houses on the ocean is because you're pretty much constantly fighting to keep your house from falling into the water. In the war of humans versus entropy, waves are the vanguard. So all around the country, you have these oyster rewilding projects which restore oyster populations to at-risk aquatic areas, and oysters repopulate like mad. They're self-aphrodisiacs too, I guess, and they clean the water, and they can help support other life forms and coastal integrity, and the only thing standing in their way is some well-intentioned food safety regulations. And the easiest way to help is to go to an oyster bar that recycles their shells and have some beers and some oysters and talk about it. Pretty good deal, right?
Yeah. So I would start Googling oyster reef restoration projects. Oyster reefs in, you can do like oyster reefs in Wellfleet or oyster reefs in Boston. Farming is a different thing. I mean, that's oyster farmers that are producing oysters for aquaculture to eat. These oyster reef projects are happening in areas that are not suitable for aquaculture. They're not suitable for people to eat, and that's why we want them there. We want them to filter the water and help to make it cleaner. So that's one thing that's the kind of dividing line. But not to worry that, the oysters you eat from the farms that you're eating from, they're in the cleanest water that you could possibly eat from. So that's kind of a regulatory standard for those oyster farms. But I would just start with like basic words, rewilding oyster reefs, oyster reef projects, things like that.
Rewilding is a good word.
Yeah, I know. I love it. I love that word, rewilding. Yeah.
Let's go down to the sea again, to the lonely sea in the sky, to the flung spume and the blown spray and the, thing in my eye.
Thank you.
That was a poem by Mr. Henry David Thoreau.
It's Wordsworth.
Or Wordsworth.
It might be Whitman.
Might be Byron.
It's not Byron.
I think it is Whitman.
Okay.
Not Whitman. I think it is. Not Walt Whitman. Well, I'm saying I think it's Slim Whitman.
Fellas, we have 10 NHL games, 8 NBA, 2 of them on the West Coast, so let's stay in business on 30 through 50. Edmonton's at Calgary, and we'll pick it up on the 2 a.m.
Can I say something?
Sure.
There's a chance it might be Dylan Thomas.
You have to imagine, Danny, how much I don't give a damn about blown spume.
It's flung spume and blown spray, but actually I like your way better.
Elliot, Kim, I'm gonna need some people to triple up on games tonight.
That's a clip from Sports Night, and the poem is actually Sea Fever by John Masefield. I must go down to the seas again, to the lonely sea and the sky, and all I ask is a tall ship and a star to steer her by, and the wheels kick, and the wind's song, and the white sails shaking, and a gray mist on the sea's face, and a gray dawn breaking. I must go down to the seas again, for the call of the running tide is a wild call and a clear call that may not be denied. And all I ask is a windy day with the white clouds flying, and the flung spray and the blown spume and the seagulls crying. I must go down to the seas again, to the vagrant gypsy life, to the gull's way and the whale's way, where the wind's like a whetted knife. And all I ask is a merry yarn from a laughing fellow rover, and a quiet sleep and a sweet dream when the long trick's over. I've always felt drawn to the ocean, and not just because I have a horrible fear of drowning. I've lived near the ocean for most of my adult life, and I find that returning to the sea is kind of a mental reset button and spiritual multivitamin. Just standing there, looking at the waves. It's good for me. Which is why I was struck by Allison's film and the bizarre potential of oysters, and which is also why, as I continued to think about improved aquatic systems, I contacted Stephen Headland and Becky Holt of the Global Aquaculture Alliance.
This is like I used to do a lot of stuff with video. This is the microphone I always thought would be so much less intimidating.
I know, right?
But it's not. No, people get more weirded out by a microphone.
I know than a camera sometimes.
Yeah, it's like it's like more responsibility.
It's true. It's weird being on the side. My name is Becky Holt. I'm the membership manager here, and I also produce GAA films for the organization.
So my name is Steve Headland. I'm the communications manager for the Global Aquaculture Alliance, and my primary responsibilities are our annual goal conference and our Global Aquaculture Advocate online magazine.
Now that conference just happened, right?
It did.
So you're like in summer vacation mode right now?
Yeah, it's the beginning of my year mentally.
Yeah.
So I'm in a good mood. Yeah.
Well, perfect timing then.
Yeah.
Okay, so tell me about how much of this I get right. Okay. So as the population rises, this demand for seafood is on the rise, but the supply of like wild fisheries and stuff is on the decline, which means we have to get really good at sustainable, responsible aquaculture, and what the GAA does is helps assist that to happen.
You nailed it.
Yeah?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, to refine that a little more, Steve told me that wild fisheries production has basically leveled off, meaning that we're getting as much food right now out of the ocean as we sustainably can, which means we need to increase the amount of available seafood without derailing the ecosystem. So, it's not like the GAA can fix this by handing out free fishing poles.
And as you said, population, especially the middle class in Asia, is rising and eating more seafood. So, what is it? What's the supply gap that we need to come up with? It's like 40 million or 45 million metric tons between now and 2030. So our role is to help ensure that growth happens sustainably.
And much of what blocks aquaculture a lot of times is the public perception of aquaculture. So we also focus a lot on that, which is why we created GAA Films, was to put sort of the human face on aquaculture and show that these are just farmers. This is where your seafood comes from. It's not this sort of dirty image that has been perpetuated over time.
Yeah, what do people get wrong? Where do they think that this is? What do they think when they hear aquaculture?
Well, it's partially the industry's fault, because the industry hasn't done a very good job of telling the story of responsible aquaculture, and that's part of what we're trying to do, what Becky's trying to do. People pick up on the misperceptions of the negativity surrounding aquaculture. So it's on us as an industry to counter the misperception, to counter the negativity with positivity. So
if I can just pause this for a second and hammer my themes home a little bit, Allison Keir is trying to fight misconceptions that oyster rewilding is aquaculture. It's not. It's more aqua infrastructure, if I may. Meanwhile, Steve and Becky here are fighting misconceptions about actual aquaculture, but all three of them are achieving their goals with a focus on positive art. Isn't that so cool?
And the negativity, for an example, would be things like basically mismanaged farms. The things you're feeding them are dirty. It's overcrowded. Maybe there's slave labor happening on your farm, which isn't always a misconception, which is the type of stuff that we try to address here. So it's safety issues, health issues, but that's why we exist, to help improve those.
Are there equivalent organizations for other food sources? I think that maybe the thing that people are most familiar with is like the USDA or something, and we are definitely aware of the fact that there's so little actual oversight, like at a government level. Although we have this, like, there's like a USDA certified whatever thing on your food normally, but is this something that's more specific to seafood?
Yeah.
Like there's no need for it?
No, that's a good question. So the USDA or FDA or any national food safety or food regulatory agency only has so much resources. So industry, food production industries, ours and others, rely on third-party certification to get the type of third-party assurance that the marketplace, the retail and food service operators who provide food to consumers are. We feel a need to address the challenges facing aquaculture, whether it's environmental or social or food safety or animal husbandry, at the production level, which regulatory agencies can't. They just don't have the resources to do all of that, and they try to address it at the port of entry through inspection, but they can only do maybe 1 or 2% of total U.S. seafood imports. So we address challenges at the source so that when the product comes over here or anywhere, those problems are already addressed. Those assurances are already there.
And when Steve is talking about we also have within GAA, I guess we didn't say this, the Best Aquaculture Practices certification, BAP certification, which is part of that audit that happens on the ground to make sure everything is going well. Not to scare anyone, but when you think about seafood globally, BAP only certifies just over 2% of the world's aquaculture. And I think we're the leading certifier in aquaculture thus far. So there's a lot of work to be done, I guess, at the end of the day.
Yeah. And it's an eco label. It's like Fair Trade or Rainforest Alliance or others.
Right.
That's what. And it goes to what we're saying. What Becky's saying a lot is you can't just solve the challenges with any one thing. So we have a third-party certification program. We have film initiative to deal with consumer perception. We have, a conference and a magazine to bring industry together, to act as a convener. We have membership. We have a new online community bringing people together. So we get involved in projects that address improver projects and that sort of thing too, or tackle an animal disease issue. And there are so many roles that we play. And others in the industry play. You have your little piece of the puzzle to try to improve things. So,
yeah, it seems like you stay busy.
Yeah, there's.
Are we rambling? That was a good summary, though.
I'm like imagining trying to get my head around having to do all of that and to know, like, that this food gap is so big, that the percentage of people that are certified is so small. It's like you're at the bottom of a very big hill.
Yes.
If this were an episode of Frasier, the act break title card would say, "How do you solve a problem like marine life?"
Yes.
But the hill's there, which I guess is something that is with a lot of our other problems in the world. We don't have the exact measurements of the hill, but like we know what we're dealing with here, which is cool. And I think that maybe part of the reason, I had all these points of comparison when I was thinking about the BAP certification. I also wasn't sure if it was BAP certification or BAP. There were meetings about that. Like, should we say BAP? I know those are important decisions you got to make. Like the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Association, like they go by NOAA, which I've always thought, like, don't they feel weird if they ever have to talk about like a flood? Like, if NOAA says there's going to be a flood, like it just seems like
I've never thought of that.
That should have been a conversation,
Yeah.
but I'm sure that conversation happened like in 1909 or whatever. So
I'm sure that headline has happened somewhere at some point in time.
Yeah. So, all right, now I feel like what I was going to say was that I feel like I have so many, I made these kind of points of comparison to like fit my head around it, which speaks to like the importance of storytelling and everything. I talk all the time about like how what a sucker I am for storytelling. Like if I go to a brewery and the brewer tells me about how he made the beer, I'm gonna buy that beer every time I go to the store forever. So if I understand the issue, and I think a lot of people are like that, if you understand where something comes from, if you can think about it in terms of a story, it makes it much more understandable. And so that's sort of the idea behind this film initiative, and you guys have been pretty productive. Like we saw your second film, the third one's already out. So how long ago did this whole initiative start?
So GAA Films started, I guess the idea was kind of born like mid last year. So it's been quick. It's been kind of a whirlwind.
Yeah.
We filmed our first film in Zitácuaro, Mexico, and we featured a women-owned trout farm, second generation, and filmed in November, launched in February. Since then, we have filmed 2 more films, just released the second, third is coming out at the end of the month. So we've had a really busy year, and part of that was driven just by the success of the first film, realizing that we got the audience. We're speaking to the right people. People are seeing these films and they're not feeling pitched to. They're not feeling like we're trying to over-explain aquaculture or explain to them why aquaculture is so great. We're literally just depicting the story of a person that's in it every day, why they do it, the things they care about, the people they love, the place that they live. And like you just said, I'm a sucker for storytelling too. Like I want to see a face and I want to see a place behind, maybe what I'm eating, what I think I may eat someday. I want to see that those people are happy, thriving, that they have the same concerns that I have. This is the thing that I did not want GAA Films to be marketing pieces, and I am still driving for that and even trying to work further away from that. How can we take this to a more artistic place and really just make it relatable to anyone trying to understand what fish farming is, or maybe not even trying to understand what fish farming is, and they understand it through trying to understand a person.
Mm-hmm. That's the dream. Like, you can to get people to understand the idea that the non-marketing, like not trying to sell somebody on it, is what actually convinces people.
Exactly. Will you work with me, please? You're hired.
I definitely sensed that Becky was a kindred spirit, and I eagerly look forward to when she creates the nature documentary equivalent of Metal Machine music or, Yeezus. In fact, I, legitimately want to help. When I set out last summer with the vague notion of improving the world in some small way, I would have never dreamed that the answer might be supporting the creation of deliberately non-commercial documentary shorts about seafood producers around the world. 1,000 Zach Littles working on 1,000 typewriters for 1,000 years would have not been able to come up with as great an answer.
So, how do you go about finding these people?
That is the hardest part, is to find a story that, when you hit the ground, you're going to connect with that person enough that they'll open up to you, and also have kind of all the right aspects. I think that the first thing I look for is it needs to be a place that's meant to be filmed. Nobody wants to watch a film in a dungeon. They want to watch it in, something happening in beautiful central Mexico that abuts a butterfly sanctuary, or, in the Caribbean, with these beautiful glassy blue waters. Like, that's how you're going to really hook people. So it kind of starts there for me. But a lot of times it's through colleagues. We have such a wealth of knowledge here at GAA that they know the places, they know the producers. We have a lot of members that have farms in all parts of the world. So they give suggestions sometimes, but, they don't fund it in any sort of way. We don't, allow them to have any input into how this is made, which is nice. I kind of have to be a bulldog about that, but it works.
Yeah, I can see that being the tricky part.
Have there been any projects you scrapped because it wasn't quite the right person or place?
Yes.
Dead ends.
Yes.
Right? Dead ends. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, there was a couple. Yeah, I won't name names.
Yeah, I'm sure, and obviously this this involves a lot of travel, going and shooting this stuff, so that can probably be a really difficult part. Like,
Yeah.
oh, I came up halfway across the world. And this isn't going to work out.
Yeah, I'm looking to do a little more scouting in 2018. So we've talked about doing one film per quarter, and so that will involve actually going to the place beforehand and making sure, just with time and resources, I haven't been able to do that. So this next go around, it'll be nice to go visit the place, talk to people, get them comfortable with us first, because as you know, walking into a room with a microphone, you know, some people, that's like their biggest fear. And if they don't know you, then, you know, they're going to clam up. And so that kind of pre-work helps.
Does having that kind of deadline help too? Like, one thing we always like to ask people is like, how do you know when you're finished? So like, if you're working on a project, how do you stop fine tuning it forever? And I feel like if you're like, all right, I'm going to do 4 this year.
Yeah.
Sometimes I think almost that can help be
Absolutely,
more creative when
yes.
you have to finish it. It has to get done.
Absolutely, because last year it was like, oh, we're going to do one and see how it goes. If it fails, we're not going to do another one. And it was so great that after that first one, I was told to do 5 more in 5 months. And I was like, no. No, how about 3? So we settled on 3. But yes, I think that lead time is really important, just creatively too, and also editing takes a long time. And editing is a brutal process because you go spend 3 days with someone and you have 10 stories you could tell, but you have to pick the one thread that you think is going to resonate the most.
You know, as an organization, we've always been very industry facing, and we've kind of worked our way backwards, industry facing to consumer facing, where we're finding different ways to communicate with the public, which we've never really done before, and which Becky and others have really helped us with. So it kind of goes back to what I was saying about filling in the gaps. Where are we not communicating with the public or various segments of the industry, and how do we fill those gaps, you know, to the benefit of the greater good of responsible agriculture. So
I guess we also would hope that they would look for some sort of certification on their seafood. Like, look for that logo, look for our logo, look for any logo. Like, ask the question of, you know, where did this seafood come from? Yeah, because we do that with other forms of produce all the time. Like, was this chicken, you know, free range? Is the cow grass fed? You know, does anybody have a question about seafood and where it comes from or what it's fed? Really? Like, do we even know? Do people know that fish are fed pellets? I don't know.
I just learned it right now.
I keep wanting to say something conclusive here, like talk about what we learned or share a related anecdote from my life, but I'm okay with this episode instead feeling just like the beginning of something, without an ending. In my life right now, I'm really enjoying the beginnings of things. But the truth is, Allison, Steve, and Becky all said stuff toward the end of our talks that function so well as episode endings that, like, I couldn't believe my goddamn luck. Like, they're sharing their own thoughts about their own work, but they might as well be speaking from inside my brain. What's the hardest part about being a documentarian?
Oh my God, money. No, it's definitely a challenge, I would say, because it's anything you read about documentaries. It's, you know, that's the hardest part, is raising money for it. But it is also pulling a story together. I mean, there's no one telling you how to do this. There's no script, really. I mean, you can write one. It will probably change. You just don't know if it's going to come together or work at all. I mean, you know, really the whole time. I mean, at least for me, that's how I felt. I mean, I think my next project, it's all there. So that's helpful.
Is that good or is that scary? Like, if it's all there now, what's it going to be?
It's good, but it's a little overwhelming because there is a lot there. And it's kind of just fishing through, you know, what's going to work, what can you put together. This was different because, I mean, I was just kind of going with it, you know, and I got to a point where just, you know, we had such a good time, and we met so many great people, and we ate so many good oysters. It's like, even if this doesn't come together, like I learned so much, and you know, it's nice to know that we have such a kind and like giving industry in our country. I mean, the oyster communities that I met with were, you know, very supportive of one another. You know, they loved being in the environment. They loved knowing they were benefiting the environment, and they loved they loved to talk about anyone that was interested to listen. They were very open armed, so, you know, I really enjoyed it. I think any advice I could give was just make sure you really love what you're doing. You really care about what you're doing, because that's what's going to get you through it when it's hard. You know, if you're just doing it because it's the new it story and you think it's cool, like, that's not necessarily going to get you through the hard times of it. You know, it has, I think, with documentaries, it really has to come from an authentic place, and some of the best that we've seen, you know, that comes out, you know, in the film. The people that made it really felt passionate about what the issue or the story is that they're telling, and you feel that projecting from it. So, you know, I think some of the best documentaries come from that.
You know, we talked about oysters earlier. You know, the oyster farming in New England is taking off, and it's so encouraging to see. And not only is it taking off at the farm level, but it's taking off at the food service level, and you're seeing oyster farmers who are so successful that they're getting into the food service business. And then the public becomes much more, you know, diners become much more accepting of oysters and understanding oysters, because they have the farmer who owns the restaurant, and there's this connection is made, and it's so nice to see, and we're beginning to see that, especially here in New England.
And to give a local example, here in Portsmouth, UNH runs a trout farm just right off the coast of Newcastle, a trout and kelp farm. So they sell the trout to places like the Black Trumpet, you know, one of the nicest restaurants in Portsmouth. They sell, or give in a lot of cases, I think, the kelp to the Portsmouth Brewery, and they use that to make kelp beer. And it's sort of this local production story, and that's aquaculture.
And that's also, you know, everything this show is about. God damn, guys, I really had no idea I was going to be able to tie this all back together in such a neat little bow. I mean, it really wasn't me. All credit is due to our guests on today's show, Allison Keir, Becky Holt, Stephen Headland. Thank you so much to them and to the GAA for talking to us. We'll be back in a week or two with another regular episode of The Last Podcast. I'm actually recording this on Connor Oberst's birthday and feeling really bad that I don't have a new episode of Bright Eyes, Full Hearts Can't Lose to release, but we're going to record a bunch of those soon. Morgan just moved down the street from me, so it's going to be great. Thank you so much for listening. Have a great week.